Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back to today's Daf Hayemi, BECHOROS Daf Yates. We begin at the Mishnah, which is 2 lines from the top. Says the Mishnah, Yotzei Doif, and we have an animal giving birth unnaturally by cesarean. So, before we begin, we're going to discuss the what defines the term Bechor pertaining to firstborn human, Bechor Adam, pertaining to firstborn kosher animal, Bechor Behemoth-Tahira, which is delivered to the Kohen, processed as a carbon. We have, last but not least, the Peter Chamor, right, firstborn donkey, with its procedure. So what is considered firstborn? How do we define the term Bechor? There are basically 3 variations, 3 possible definitions of the term Bechor. It can be the first overall, first offspring period. It can be the first male. And thirdly, it can be the first naturally born offspring, because it followed a cesarean birth which preceded this one. So the term Bechor must be first defined before we know how to proceed and how to apply it. Says the Mishnah, suppose you have a Bechor which only contains one element of firstness. He's not a complete Bechor. He's not the first, first born, the first natural birth. He just has one element. He's a Yotzei Doif, so he's the first birth, but he was born unnaturally by cesarean. So he has one element of firstness, the first birth. Haba Achrav, and the offspring that follows that one. And this one was born naturally, derech the womb, the rechem. So he also has an element of firstness. He's the Peta Rechem. He opened the rechem. He was discharged by the rechem, first one. But in terms of general, offspring count, he's number 2. So each one of these, suppose they're animals, firstborn animals, each one of these animals has an element of Bechor to it. But it's not a complete Bechor. The first one is the first offspring, but not by way of natural birth. The second one is the first natural birth, but it's not the first offspring. What is their status? Rabbi Tarfon Omer, we're not really sure. There's an uncertainty here. There's a suffix whether one element of firstness suffices to give you status of Bechor Shneim. So both animals, the owner will keep them, hold on to them, but treat them in special fashion. He'll have to let them go, send them out to pasture to get a blemish, and then only then can he shecht and eat it, because they're possibly considered Bechor. Shneim Yirach Isto. They are both sent out to pasture until they get a blemish. In which case the owner eats them once they're blemished, because there's a suffix whether this constitutes Bechor. Rabbi Kiva, no way. Unless you're complete and total Bechor, born naturally, the first offspring, period, no ifs or buts. Unless you completely, wholly, totally, completely a Bechor, you're not a Bechor. Both are not a Bechor. You know why? Harishain, the first one, because he was not born naturally, he's not Peta Rechem. He was born by cesarean. The second one was preceded by the first. He's not the first offspring. He's preceded by the first one. But my commitment, what's the Mechoikas about? Tarfon is not sure if a single element of firstness suffices to give it Bechor status. Misapkali Bechor lidavar echad. It's a Bechor regarding one aspect. You have a Bechor, is considered a Bechor, or have a Bechor or not. Kiva Pshita, Kiva is simple to him. It's obvious. The Bechor means totally and completely. Anything less than that does not cut it. Bechor lidavar echad, a Bechor to a single element is not a Bechor. Tan Rabbana. Here comes a price. which will elaborate on the psukim that talk about bechor. Now, before we proceed, if you have it on the side, it's very convenient to take a look at the psukim. So we have Kaddish Likol Bechor, right? Referring to all types of bechor, firstborn males, firstborn animals, right? Peter Kol Rechem, Bivnei Yisrael Ba'adam, right? Ba'behem Alihu. Kaddish Kol Bechor here is a very general term, all bechor. Then we have a pasuk in Dvarim. Kol HaBechor Asher Yivoled B'Bechorcha B'Tzencha, HaZachar, Kaddish Hashem, so it's limited to Zachar. We have another pasuk in Shmos. V'artikol Peter Rechem L'Hashem. Clearly, it only applies to Peter Rechem, a natural birth through the rechem, and the first one discharged by the rechem. Tan Rabbanan. So this brisa will focus on three of the. It's actually the well-known brisa of Rabbi Shmuel that we say in the morning. That presents all the the 13 Yud Gimel Midos Shator and Drashas Ben, the 13 forms of derivation. Some are more well known than others. We have first Klaloprat, right? Discussed many times in the Gemara. Klaloprat, a general term followed by a limiting term. For instance, a classic example is the pasuk at the beginning of Vayikra. We have bring a karban min behema, which indicates all behema. Then the Torah, limits it. Bakar min atzayin. That's a klal followed by a prat. That's called Klaloprat. Then we have two more that would be discussed in this coming brisa. One is called a klal hatzorech leprat, a general term which is as yet undefined until it's followed by a prat, a more detailed, more definitive description, which sheds light on the klal, which needs that clarity. See, that's different than a klal prat. Standard klal prat does not need the prat. Mina behema, right? In the aforementioned example, mina behema, all types of behema, cover everything. There's no need to elaborate further. Comes the pasuk min habakar min hatzayin, which limits it. That's called klal uprat. But here we're talking about klal hatzorach leprat. He needs it. He relies on the prat to explain, to elaborate, to clarify what he had in mind. Otherwise, it remains in the dark. It's undefined. Thirdly, we have prat hatzorach leklal, which is very similar. It's a more detailed expression which is undefined, which requires the klal to explain it and to clarify it. Tan Rabbanan. We're going to talk about miklal hatzorach lefrat and also miprat hatzorach leklal. Ketzad. So first, as Rashi explains, we're going to start with a standard klaloprat. Pasuk begins, Kaddish Likol Bechor, sanctify any bechor, irrespective of gender, male, female, or the like. Perhaps even a nekeva is considered kaddish in bechor. Talmud Bavli comes in the next pasuk and says zachar. This is your classic klaloprat. Kol bechor any, zachar limits it to a zachar. Okay, good. Checked off. Next. Now comes klal hatzorach leprat, a general term which is a bit undefined, which needs further elaboration. And that's part B of the brisa. Okay, so we discussed the first drasha, here comes the second drasha. Izachar, if only from zachar, yachal perhaps, afilu yatzu nekeva lefanav. You have a first male, even if he was following a nekeva. So the nekeva was born first, naturally born, right? Derech rechem, nothing unusual. So he's really the second, but he's really the first in terms of male offspring. He's the first zachar. There's an element of firstness there. Is that enough to consider him a bechor? He's a partial bechor, right? Like we explained before, he's not a full and total bechor. He's not the first offspring, but he's the first zachar. Talmud Lemar comes. Another pasuk and specifies peta rechem. It has to be the peta, the one that's paita the rechem, the one that opened, the one that was discharged first from the rechem, the first naturally born. So this is a klal hatzorach leprat. Zachar would seemingly include even this fellow, because he's the first zachar. Comes the pasuk peta rechem, says no, you have to be the firstborn. Okay. Part 3 of the brisa, which is going to be a prat hatzarach l'klal. If only from petarechem, I would say. Okay, so you have to be the first naturally born. That gives you the status of bechor. Yochel. Okay, so perhaps afilu yotza, even if this naturally born zachar came out after, achar yotzei doifin came out after his sibling that was born unnaturally. Perhaps this zachar that was born naturally, that's the first natural birth of this animal. Perhaps that qualifies as bechor because he's the first naturally born. Tamalayma bechor. Comes the pasuk and says, no, bechor, which is a general, more broad term, which teaches that it has to be really first, all around. So this is a prat, a detail which requires that generalization, a general term to elaborate and explain and confirm. No. Limited firstness is not enough. You have to be a full and complete first. It's not enough that you're the first naturally born offspring. You have to be absolutely first. The first offspring, period. Because that's what bechor means. He's the absolute first. Okay, so we have 3 parts to the brisa. Part 1 was kol bechor perhaps includes even females. No, zachar is the prat. Only male first. Part 2 of the brisa. Okay, if it's only zachar, I would say, okay, the first zachar. As long as there's an element of firstness. So suppose the nekeva came out first, and then comes the zachar, he's still a bechor? No, petarechem, he has to be the first naturally born. Okay, part 3. What if he's the first natural birth, but was preceded by an unnatural birth? Tamalaya bechor. That doesn't work. You have to be absolutely the first, all around. The first offspring. So you have to be a male offspring and the first of all offspring. And of course, born derech petarechem. Now, we seem to have a little bit of a seeming contradiction in this brisa. Because, this brisa, the way it concluded in the last section, in part 3, was certainly in line with Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah, that the term bechor insists on absolute firstness. He has to be a complete and total first. It's not sufficient to have an element of firstness. You have to be the absolute first on the scene to be qualified as a bechor. But if we backtrack to the second part of the brisa, where we speculated perhaps, even just having an element of firstness, being the first male on the scene, would suffice. So how did the brisa negate that? It should have just said, okay, well, that doesn't fit with the word bechor. Bechor is a complete first. Rather, the brisa went to a different pasuk, petarechem. Why? Amli Rav Shravi Labai. What does bechor mean? Does it mean complete? So why don't we just use it in the middle of the brisa as well, to knock out the partial first, just as we did in the third part of the brisa. Amli Rav Shravi Labai, Reisha. In the earlier part of the brisa, in part 2, Lo Yikonasav Talmud Bavli. The brisa did not come back with the word bechor to disqualify the partial first. Why? Alma, apparently, because at that point in the brisa, bechor l'davar have a bechor. The brisa considers a partial bechor anybody that has an element of firstness to be considered a bechor. So that's why it could not rule it out from the word bechor. But then a minute later, in the third part of the brisa, we do exactly that. Seifa, kanas l'talmud bechor. The brisa presents the word bechor to rule out anything which is less than a complete and total bechor. Alma, apparently, bechor means all-encompassing. Bechor l'davar, but just a limited bechor with a single aspect of firstness is not enough. We have a bechor. Isn't this inconsistent? Amalesi says, you're right. Certainly the brisa holds the term bechor refers to a complete bechor as opposed to a partial bechor. We have to reword the middle of the brisa. It wasn't a matter of partial or complete. It was addressing a different point altogether. Who's to say that a bechor has to be born naturally? That was the question. The answer was petarechem. Very straightforward question and answer, unrelated to partial or complete. Zachar, if only from the word Zachar, Yachal perhaps, Afilu Yetzer Daifen, even if he was born unnaturally, it qualifies as a Bechor Tamlim, Peter Rechem, it's born naturally. Okay, so point out, by clearly the word Bechor denotes a complete, total firstness. Rabbi Amar says, no, not so quick, Lo'ilam. Certainly, Bechor, L'davar Echad, even a single element of firstness, Hava Bechor qualifies, can be labeled Bechor. As per the middle part of the Brisa. That's why the Brisa did not prove from Bechor to negate a partial Bechor, because Bechor by definition doesn't mean all around first. Even an element of firstness would be enough. So then what does the Brisa mean at the end? The Brisa suggested that perhaps a natural birth, but he followed an unnatural birth, perhaps it qualifies, Tamlim Bechor, it doesn't, which sounds like at this point the Brisa considers Bechor to be total and complete. No, the Brisa at the end just means, it's not based on the translation, it's just based on a ribui, on the seemingly unnecessary expression of the pasuk. It's a ribui, it's an extra word which comes to address this case. So it's not by way of the meaning of the word, rather the presence of the word, the extra word, which is coming to rule out and to further define and limit the realm of Bechora, of acceptable Bechora. The Sefer HaKamen, the Brisa at the end just means to say like this: Isa kadaitach yotza achar yoytze deifin kadosh. If you will that the one that's born after Yetzer Daifen should be Kadosh. In other words, a partial firstness is enough. An element of Bechora, he's the first natural birth. That is sufficient to grant him that label. So why the extra pasuk? Bechor. The word Bechor, the Kasav Rachman, the pasuk says, Lamali, what's that for? Rashi explains in the bottom line. It could have simply said, Peta Rechem Zachar. That's it. So he's the first natural birth, male, great. Why add the word Bechor? Turn to my base. Is it simply coming to rule out a case where there was an nekeva that preceded him naturally through the rechem? Well, that's been excluded already. Peta rechem nafka. We already have a pasuk, Peta rechem, the first out of the womb. He's the second. So why does the pasuk add this expression Bechor? No, apparently the pasuk is highlighting that this doesn't work. That if he's the second birth, even if he's the first natural, no, we learn from here Bechor. The word Bechor is lemute to exclude this case heicha, a case where the Yotze is born naturally achar Yotze after an unnatural birth. So although he's the first natural, but overall he's not the first offspring, so he's excluded. So bottom line is Rashi explains ultimately Abaye and both Abaye and Ravina are going to end up at the same destination, that a partial Bechor doesn't cut it. You have to be absolutely, completely Bechor, the first all around. It's a question how to get there. According to Abaye, straightforward, he says, look, Bechor means a complete Bechor. First birth. It's not enough that you're the first male or you're the first natural birth, you have to be the first birth. Whereas according to Ravina, it's not so simple. It's not by way of definition. It's by way of the fact that it's an extra pasuk, which ups the standards, ups the bar. Right, like we explained. The term Bechor technically can relate to three elements of firstness. The first male, the first natural birth, and ultimately the first birth. So the extra pasuk ups it. and requires it to be completely first. Says the Gemara. But if it's just by way of extraness, not by way of actual definition, so yeah, it ups the standard. But who says it ups it that far? Perhaps the Torah is simply saying, look, it's not enough to have a single element of firstness. You have to have another element of firstness. You have to be the first natural birth and the first male. But let's say, listen to this, let's say he's the first naturally born and the first male, but he's not the first offspring. Why? Because he was preceded by a female animal who came out unnaturally. Perhaps that's okay. Perhaps that's enough. He has two elements of firstness. Again, if the word bechor by definition requires a full and complete bechor, okay, so we're done. No questions asked. But if it's not a technical definition, it's just the extra word, the extra pasuk is upping the standards. It requires more elements of firstness. So who says all elements are needed? Maybe it's enough to be the first male and the first natural born. Who says you have to be the absolute first on the scene? Amalei Rav Acha Medifta Ravina. Yes, Ravina. If you're going to tell me that bechor technically could refer to one element of firstness, and it's only because it's the extra pasuk which tells you that it's not enough. Okay, but who says to go all the way and require so much and complete total firstness? Teinach. I understand Hecha de Yatza Zachar Derech Taifen. I understand, I'll grant to you in a case where the first Zachar came out unnaturally, the Zachar Derech Rechem, the second one came out naturally. The Kaddish, certainly that's not going to be Kaddish. Deemed Bechor because it's excluded from Bechor. Why? The Bechor l'Rechavim Eka, although he's the first natural, he has that element, but Bechor l'Zcharim Lek, he doesn't have the element of being the first Zachar, because he was preceded by the other Zachar. Well, the Vladis Lek is certainly not the first born. Ella, but in the case where he has 2 out of 3, if the first one was in a keva unnaturally, Zachar derech rechem, comes the next one, a Zachar naturally. The Kaddish, perhaps he gets Kedusha, the rechem has 2 elements on his side. He has 2 factors in favor. He's the first Zachar and the first Rechem. So how would you know to exclude it? Which the Brisa seems to do. The Brisa says that anybody that follows on a keva, even if she was born unnaturally, he's out. Apparently the correct approach is like Abaye. Rashi says the definition, the meaning of the wording of Bechor means complete and total firstness, which excludes everything else. Says the Mishnah. Okay, so a fellow bought an animal from a guy. It's a young sheep, a young goat. And Mazel Tov, there's a new offspring in the barn. Now, how would I know if it's a first or a second? Says Rabbi Shmuel, I'll give you a very simple age formula to determine, to confirm that in fact it's a first. If the animal is too young to have already experienced a birth prior to this, then you know this is the first one. A person buys an animal from a guy. He's not showing bichra, whether it already had an offspring, whether it's a veteran, even like bichra, whether it's her first time. Rav Shmuel Aimer, look, it's all age related. Is you have a goat, bashnasa. If she's birthing within her first year of her first birthday, you know this is her first time. It's impossible that this will be her second birth. She's too young. But past her first birthday, you don't know. Maybe it's her second time suffix. You have to give it a status of suffix. You know what we do? We hold on to it till it gets a mum, etc. By a rachel, by a sheep, it's time. The cutoff period is 2 years. Until that point, you know for sure belongs to the kohen. Past that point, it's a suffix. Part of a chamar, cow and a donkey. By sholish, it's about 3 years old, right? So until 3 years old, vadal kohen. It certainly goes to the kohen. It's her first time. Past that point, it's a suffix. Okay, so according to Shmuel, fairly simple. So let's say by the goat, anything below a year is her first time. Past that point, we're not sure. Amalei Rav Akiva takes issue with this absolute time frame. He says, look, you're right if it's all about birthing a live, viable offspring. But even if the animal would discharge some sort of miscarriage or some sort of clump which has a status of a birth, a semi-birth, then that's her bechora, rendering the next one a non-bechora, exempting the next one. So yeah, she's pretty young to have undergone 2 live births, but maybe she had experienced a tinuf, discharge of this material, which renders which is considered halachically like a birth. So you never know what's going on. Amar le Rabbi Akiva, ilu bevlad bilvad habeim nifteres. If you need a live, viable, vlad to exempt the animal, kedvarecha, then I'm with you. A properly formed vlad, even if it's not viable, but he's properly formed, she's too young for that. Meaning, it's certainly her first time. She hadn't done it before. El Amr, but we know the Chachamim tell us, Siman havlad bevehema, what's considered a sign of birth? What constitutes a leda? Mehimadaka, by a light animal. Tinuf, just a tinuf. A glob or something which, ubagasa, by a heavy animal. It's a shilya, it's a sack, a isha by a woman. Regarding her halacha, it's a shvir. Rashi says, oir, sheish b'tzuras havlad, partially formed, fetus. The shilya or a sack. Zaklal. So according to Rabbi Akiva, it's not about the age formula. Rather, it's as follows: Kol sheyudua shebichra. If you have it confirmed that she already gave birth, ein kan l'kohen klum. The kohen has no claim on the subsequent birth. V'chol sheloi bichra. When you know with certainty she hadn't done it earlier, this is her absolute first discharge, or is it l'kohen? So it goes to the kohen himself. You don't know. The owner keeps it and eats it when it gets him. So back to Rishmo, who says the birth by the A's up until a year is certainly her first, goes to the Kohen, but past that point we don't know. We're going to dwell on the second aspect. What do you mean past that point we don't know? It's most likely animals, that's how they do it. They breed, they birth, right? It's just a natural progression. We have a rave. Majority of animals birth immediately, right? And we can assume that once she's a year old, she's past her first. So why is it a suffix? Why do we have to treat it like a suffix? You know for sure, based on majority, based on rave, that it's her second experience. My suffix, why past a year is it a suffix? Halech acharei behemoths, follow the majority of animals. V'roiv behemoths, the natural course of events is misaber siyolis. They carry, they conceive, and they birth. Within a year. And this goat which is past the year, and certainly this one, Meilad Oilad, already gave birth. Do you want to suggest that Rishmol follows Rameh, who says, well, even when there's a rave factor in your favor, you have to be concerned about small percentages? And we don't pass on Rameh, so why would Rishmol go with that? Says the Gemara, Afilu Temer Rabban, you know what? Rabbi Shmuel, who applies the suffix status past the year, can be in line with the Rabbanan as well, who typically follow the majority factors. But here it's different. You know why? Ki azli basaruba. When do Chachamim abide by the majority factors? Beruba de isikaman, when the majority factor is present, it's in front of you. As opposed to our scenario, where it's not a majority that's here, it's a theoretical, conceptual majority. The way of the world is, the natural progression of events, it's a totally different type of rave. That's not an absolute confirmation. So what's an example of a ruba disikamon? It's a classic, I found pizza meat in the street, 9 stores selling kosher meat, 1 non-kosher, so you follow the rave. So you have these stores in front of you, you can deal with it, you can reckon with them, you can relate to them. Another example of Sanhedrin, you have the court, and you follow the majority of the dayanim, they're right here, you can relate to them. But if it's a rave factor, it's not present. Rabbanan will not follow the rave. Really? I'll give an example of a ruba that leise kamon, katan uktana. A zachor and a keva underage. The ruba that leise kamon, where the factors are not present, they're not here. V'ka'azli rabban masaru, rabban follow right. There's none. We have a mishnah, katan uktana. Lo yichotzim lo miyabin. Katan uktana cannot experience chalitza or yibam. To be rameir. Amalei Chacham respond, Yafa amarta shein chotzin. We agree that they can't do chalitza because there you need an adult. Ish ksiva parshanut-torah says that the Male has to be an ish, an adult, and the female as well. Makshini shel ish, we connect the two. So just as the boy has to be an adult, likewise the woman. But what about Yibum? What's wrong with that? There's no stipulation of ish. Why require an adult? He says, technically there's nothing holding you back, but you never know. You see, Yibum is only allowed when both the man and the woman are of childbearing ability. They have the ability to bear children. That's the whole point of Yibum, to perpetuate the memory, to continue the legacy. So until they turn adult, in which case they would exhibit signs of maturity, and in the absence of those signs, you'll know that there's room to suspect that he's sterile and she's unable to bear. Until that point, until you have it confirmed, you can't take chances. Amalami says to the Chacham Katan, we're not going to allow Yibum by a Katan. Shemi Matzi, he might turn out to be sterile. Katana by the young women as well. Shemati Matzi Islandess might be discovered to be an islandess, unable to bear children. V'nim to Pagan Be'erva, and in which case the Yibum is unallowed. It's like marrying a relative for no good reason. For Rabban say no. Zilba Saruba, follow the majority. The most likely scenario is that they're healthy. Most kids out there are healthy. Roiv Ktanim, right? Roiv Ktanim lava asrisim ninu. Most Ktanim are not sterile. Zilba Sar, Roiv Ktanis, follow Roiv of Ktanis. Roiv Ktanis love Eilonis ninhu. So clearly, the Chacham relate to the majority factor, even when it's a conceptual, a natural, theoretical phenomenon. So why not do the same with the goat? Once it's past a year, most likely the animal already gave birth, and at this point, it's yours to keep. Why does Rishmal consider it a suffix? Ela marava machmarta Rishmal kremeyasvili, right? Turn to the next page. The correct understanding of Rishmal is that he's going like Rameir. The Chayish L'Miyuta, that he's concerned even about a small percentage. In which case, perhaps this goat was an exception to the rule. It's her first time, so you have to treat it as a Safek Bechor. Ravina Amar, Filutim Rabban. Ravina says, you know what, even Rabban would agree in our case that it's treated differently. And here we have to be concerned about even a slight chance. Why? Ki Azl Rabban Masaruba. When the Rabbanon go with the Roiv factor, Beruba de Loitali B'Masa, when it's a Roiv factor, undependent, based on action, a natural phenomenon, which is not linked to an act, as opposed to our discussion of Aruba Tali Masa. Here it's Tali Masa, it's linked to an act. Rashi says the animal has to be has to mate, has to breed, right? It's a may or may not have happened. It's not an automatic thing. So here we have to be concerned that perhaps it never occurred, and you have to treat the offspring as a Safek Bechor, that perhaps this is the first time around, and therefore it has a din of a Safek. Okay, so and again we have the fellow who purchased the animal from the Goy. There's a Mazel Tov. Is it the first? Is it the second? Rishmal pins it on the time frame. He says, look, if it's within a year, it's her first. If it's past a year old, it's a Safek. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. He says, even within a year, maybe there was a Tinov already, and this is the second experience. In any case, why is Rabbi Shmuel considering a Safek past a year, when the Roiv would point to the fact that this is certainly her second time? You have two pshatim. Either we're concerned even about small percentages, unlikely possibilities, according to Rameir, or even the Rabban agree, because it's a Roiv, a Tali B'Maisa, which may never have occurred. Okay, all the best to you, and Atzlacha Rabbah.